The heartbreaking video of a 5-year-old Syrian boy named Amran sitting in an ambulance after being pulled from the rubble after an airstrike in Aleppo focused the world's attention on the horrors of the war in Syria, with 136 million views on Facebook alone. But there are much worse images coming out of Aleppo every day now, where in the past few weeks alone, 400 people have been killed, at least 100 of them children. Just days ago, the State Department called for a war crimes investigation of the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad and its ally, Russia, for their bombardment of Aleppo. So this next question comes from social media through Facebook. Diane from Pennsylvania asks, if you were president, what would you do about Syria and the humanitarian crisis in Aleppo? Isn't it a lot like the Holocaust when the U.S. waited too long before we helped? Secretary Clinton, we will begin with your 2 minutes.
Well, the situation in Syria is catastrophic. And every day that goes by, we see the results of the regime by Assad in partnership with the Iranians on the ground, the Russians in the air, bombarding places, in particular Aleppo, where there are hundreds of thousands of people, probably about 250,000 still left. And there is a determined effort by the Russian Air Force to destroy Aleppo in order to eliminate the last of the Syrian rebels who were really holding out against the Assad regime. Russia hasn't paid any attention to ISIS. They're interested in keeping Assad in power. So when I was Secretary of State, advocated, and I advocate today, a no-fly zone and safe zones. We need some leverage with the Russians because they're not going to come to the negotiating table for a diplomatic resolution unless there is some leverage over them. And we have to work more closely with our partners and allies on the ground. But I want to emphasize that what is at stake here is the ambitions and the aggressiveness of Russia. Russia has decided that it's all in Syria. And they've also decided who they want to see become president of the United States, too, and it's not me.
She talks tough. She talks really tough against Putin and against Assad. She talks in favor of the rebels. She doesn't even know who the rebels are. You know, every time we take rebels, whether it's in Iraq or anywhere else, we're arming people. And you know what happens? They end up being worse than the people. Look at what she did in Libya with Gaddafi. Gaddafi's out. It's a mess. And by the way, ISIS has a good chunk of their oil. I'm sure you probably have heard that. It was a disaster. Because the fact is, almost everything she's done in foreign policy has been a mistake, and it's been a disaster. So she wants to fight. She wants to fight for rebels. There's only one problem. You don't even know who the rebels are.
Mr. Trump,
so
Mr.
what's
Trump,
the purpose?
your 2 minutes
and one
is
thing I have to say,
your 2 minutes
I don't
is
like
up.
Assad at all, but Assad is killing ISIS. Russia is killing ISIS, and Iran is killing ISIS. And those three have now lined up because of our weak foreign policy.
Okay, they're killing ISIS and Al-Qaeda and al-Nusra with massive civilian casualties, so let's be fair, because that's totally true. But yeah, they are killing them. Okay, in that exchange, it's not even close. Donald Trump has the better position and the more liberal position. Not even close. It's not even close. Now, there were a few edits there, and to be fair, in between, in those parts there, he does say some stupid shit. Like, at one point, he randomly starts ripping the Iran deal in the middle of the Syria conversation, which on that front, Donald Trump is 100% wrong. Hillary Clinton is 100% right, saying, let's keep the Iran deal is good, it's better, yada, yada, yada. And he's like, no, rip it up. So on Iran, it flips, and Hillary's right, he's wrong. But on the issue of Syria, Hillary's pretty much as bad as it gets. I mean, so let's break this down. The framing of the question was massively right-wing. It's like a neocon think tank came up with the wording of that question. They basically said, Secretary Clinton, isn't the Syrian government like Nazi Germany? Your thoughts? Notice how it's hilarious. Syria. Oh my God, should we do regime change? Should we do regime change? Should we do regime change? Oh my God, we get a humanitarian crisis. Humanitarian crisis, we care so much. The day before this debate, The Saudi government, with weapons we gave them, attacked a funeral in Yemen where minimum 140 civilians are dead, and you have hundreds of people injured as well. They've attacked a potato chip factory in Yemen. They've attacked mosques, hospitals, schools for the blind. They're targeting civilians on purpose. Over 50% of the dead are civilians. They're using chemical weapons, which is against international law. They're using cluster bombs, which is against international law because it kills massive numbers of civilians. Not only do we not care about the humanitarian crisis, over 50% of Yemen is starving right now. There's a fucking famine going on, and we're letting Saudi Arabia blockade it. You don't care about the humanitarian crisis. If you did, that's the first thing you would do, because you can actually affect that in an easier way. All you have to do is say, we're cutting off your weapons. That's it. Okay, we're cutting off your weapons, and we're also not going to help you in bombing anymore. And if you really want to get serious, sanction them. But not only do they not talk about any of that, the idea of maybe doing military action against Saudi Arabia to do regime change because they're doing a humanitarian crisis never enters the conversation. Of course not. That'd be fucking crazy. So why isn't it crazy with Assad? Why isn't it crazy? You have the Saudi regime doing some atrocities, the Assad government, some would argue, doing some atrocities. Only one we focus on. Oh my God, topple. Oh my God, regime change. Why? Because it ain't about the fucking humanitarian crisis and altruism and being the world police. It's about the geopolitical situation. Assad is aligned with Russia. Assad is aligned with Iran. As Hillary admits and says, well, what this is really about is Russia and the geopolitical chessboard. And we can't have them with an ally in Syria, so that's why we got to topple the Syrian government. She basically admits what it's really about in the debate. So it's got nothing to do with the humanitarian crisis. That's a cover. That is a cover. If they cared about a humanitarian crisis, stop arming Israel to the tune of $38 billion as they fucking do an apartheid state and take more and more Palestinian land. Stop arming Saudi Arabia, who says all atheists are terrorists and they behead people in the public square for sorcery and apostasy and drug crimes and witchcraft. Okay, so nothing about Yemen, but Syrian government, Nazi Germany, that's what they're like. Also, by the way, you care so much about humanitarian crisis, and not a word about the Congo, not a word about South Sudan, not a word about Burundi, not a word about Mali, where northern Mali is basically Al-Qaeda-stan, not a word about North Korea. Oh my God, it's a regime change in Syria. Okay, and then she goes on to say, well, look, I'm in favor of a no-fly zone and a safe zone. Now, later on, she says, oh, I don't want to put ground troops in there. Hillary, a no-fly zone and a safe zone requires ground troops. In fact, it requires tens of thousands of ground troops to accomplish it. And the worst part of all is, she says we need to do this to have leverage with Russia. Just gonna fucking give you leverage? You're escalating to World War III needlessly. Because you're fine with sending young men and women from Kentucky and Nebraska to die over Aleppo. Well, guess what? We're not fine with that. We're not fine with that. Stop with your hawkish bullshit. We're tired of it. And then Trump rightly says, you don't even know who the fucking rebels are. You want to arm the rebels. Are you kidding me? Yes, the rebels are Al-Qaeda. Al-Nusra, who said recently, we broke up with them and now we're moderate. I'm not kidding. They're trying to do a rebrand. Sure, we were their official affiliate in the region, but now we broke up with them, so we're moderate? You want to give us weapons? We already tried to arm rebels. Guess what happened? They went into Syria. They immediately handed over their weapons to Al-Qaeda. We did a program to find moderate rebels. We found literally like 4 people. I'm not joking about that. I am not joking. ISIS is one of the biggest rebel groups as well. So you want to arm the rebels. That's the same mistake we made over and over. Ronald Reagan made it with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. Arm them because they'll fight the big bad Soviet Union. And then, boom, they broke up into the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. They used the weapons against us. And then final point is this. Dude. What's the lesson? What's the main lesson of Libya and Iraq? What is it? Okay, look, there could be some really bad dudes, really bad, sometimes authoritarian leaders in these countries. Really bad. But you know what? It turns out, if we do intervention and we topple those leaders, it gets worse. What fills the vacuum is worse than what already is. Every liberal on the planet looks at Iraq and now says that. Why would we topple it? Nobody's defending Saddam. We're not defending Saddam. We all hate Saddam. That's a given. The question is, what will replace him, and will it be worse, and will it lead to more death, more destruction, more problems? The answer was yes. Never mind the fact they didn't attack us, so we invaded a country that didn't attack us and we toppled them. Same thing with Syria. You want to topple Assad. Assad's not attacking us. He's not about to attack us. He's got no plans to fucking attack us. So you're admitting this isn't a defensive war. We're gonna be on the offense here. We're gonna do the same thing we did in Iraq. Libya, yeah, topple the government. Oh, Gaddafi, so bad. Yeah, agree, so bad, terrible. That doesn't necessitate us doing intervention and fucking toppling him and maybe making the situation worse. This is the same lesson. We just learned this fucking lesson. And Hillary Clinton, who now says, oh, I'm so sorry about Iraq, I learned my lesson, is like, okay, when do we do regime change in Syria? The rhetoric from Donald Trump on Syria was just flat out better than Hillary Clinton. It wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. Now, to be fair, I don't think he has any fucking clue what he's talking about, and he's just arguing the counterpoint to whatever Hillary's arguing. So Hillary's more hawkish. He's like, okay, now I'm less hawkish. Like on the Iran deal, she's less hawkish, so he gets more hawkish. No, rip up the deal, fucking escalate. So I don't think he knows what he's doing, but there's no doubt his rhetoric there was better. And Mike Pence last week was the opposite. Let's escalate with Syria, let's escalate with Russia. And Trump's like, no, let's do the opposite. So there's no cohesion. There's, tapes of Donald Trump clearly not knowing the difference between Sunni and Shia. There's tapes of him not knowing the difference between Hamas and Hezbollah. So he's an idiot, don't get me wrong. And he's a lunatic. But Hillary is so bad on Syria that she somehow made Donald Trump look reasonable.